Hi, Jim. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's really a treat to be here with you because I always love my conversations with you. And like I was mentioning before, you have such a strong personal spiritual practice that when you engage in conversations like this with you, you drop in so fast, and I always learn something new.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. I mean, I've kind of dedicated my life to this. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk more today about ancestral trauma. I feel like that's a word that's coming up, or people are really working hard to not continue patterns that they've seen in their family. And I want to talk about all the different ways that shows up and how we can take a spiritual approach to breaking ancestral trauma or changing familiar habits in a way that's has a lot more ease and grace, and that not where we're forcing ourselves, where it's an easier flow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. I mean, when you talk about like ancestral trauma, you know, I think people have to understand what it is, first of all, right? You know,
Definition of
well, my definition of ancestral trauma is something that in the past wasn't completely experienced. And so it got stuck in the energy field of the individual. Right? And whatever's stuck in our energy field, we're going to create with. As like if we have a lot of fear of lack or something in our energy field, or we have a trauma to where, we had a episode in our life to where we felt like we were going to be attacked and we, feared losing our bodies. And it was too strong for us to really be with and be present with. Then it kind of gets just stuck in us. It kind of goes into that freezer section to where it no longer evolves. It just gets stuck in that day or time. So like, let's say that you're a little girl and your parents, you don't know good from bad or right from wrong or whatever, and you're just really you're very helpless to their belief systems at that point, right? And so whatever they believe is bad, you agree to subconsciously. It's just like, okay, it's bad, because if you don't, you get punished anyway, right? So your parents will tell you, this is good and this is bad, and you want their love and approval, so you try to do things that are good and avoid things that are bad. But let's say something happens to you that's so traumatic that you can't bear to experience that situation or process the feeling. Okay, so then you've got this energy in your energy field, and instead of just breathing it out or releasing it and just letting it evaporate, you suppress it. And once you suppress that energy in you, that energy's automatically going to start to attract something in your outside world that matches the energy that's stuck in you. And it's only for your own healing at that point, because that energy, if it's a traumatic energy, it's not of light, it's not of love. And our essence is light and love. So anything that's stuck in us that isn't that is going to be forced to the surface over and over again until it gets cleared out of us. Does that make sense?
yes. And how do
Okay.
we clear it out of us?
Well, that's the most important thing, I think, is to really start to learn to be completely present and aware of it. Start to become aware of it. Okay, so like, trying to think of a good example from my own life. Okay, well, I'll give you an example of when I was first learning about ancestral healing. Okay, I had this pain in my stomach, and it wouldn't go away, but I didn't really know anything except for it irritated me. I didn't want it there, so I was trying to get rid of it. And so it wasn't going away. And I thought, well, should I go to the doctor? And I was like, no, I don't need to go to the doctor. And so I called a friend of mine, and he's very psychic and intuitive. And he said, let me check and see where it's coming from. And he looked in and he says, he goes, this didn't originate with you. And I said, what do you mean? It's inside my stomach. And he's like, well, when I look into it, your father's father, when he was about 4 years old, had a very traumatic experience. And in his whole lifetime, he could never bear to feel the feelings associated with it. And that's what's pushing inside you right now. He goes, is it okay just to take a few minutes and just really let that feeling completely express itself? And I said, okay, so I'm an empath. I'm used to feeling things. And so I just started breathing into it, which is a good thing to do, because when you breathe into something, your breath is always in the present moment. Okay. So when you focus on your breath, you're in the present moment. And just by being in the present moment, you start to connect to your essence, to the light within you. Okay. And it's all knowing, and it knows how to heal anything that's not like itself. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I breathed into it and I felt it, and it was uncomfortable, but I was taught a long time ago, just be comfortable with what's uncomfortable because it's not going to hurt you. And so I breathed into it and I just felt it about as fully as I could for about a minute. And then it just transmuted and it just kind of dissolved. And I was still on the phone with them. And I said, well, I don't feel it anymore. And he goes, it's gone. And he goes, and your grandfather says, thank you. Because it was something that he couldn't complete. So I completed it for him.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's really, when you talk about like ancestral healing and ancestral trauma, that's a really good definition of ancestral trauma. It means that it's something that wasn't completely experienced and healed in one of your relatives' past lives or, current life, and it's given to the person that can clear it. Okay. So
Yes.
in like family systems, there's people that are a little bit more evolved than the other ones. And sometimes they take on more of the emotional pain and suffering because they're clearing it for the whole family. Okay.
Yes.
And it's not something to judge yourself. You're not being punished. It's just something that you need to learn how to clear more quickly with less suffering so that it doesn't ruin your day. Right? Does that make sense? Okay.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you're sharing that particular example because so many people are suffering with gut issues.
Yes.
Very much this is why I have this podcast, is to help people understand that we're multidimensional beings with a physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental body. And that a lot of our gut issues don't have to do with the food that we're eating, or sometimes don't even have to do with the emotions that we're holding and carrying. Sometimes it's beyond us. And that's a lot of what I suffered with when I was young. And until I found this type of work, I wasn't set free. And there's so many alternative solutions to feeling better in our body. And I believe that this is one of them.
Suffering is only painful as long as you're doing it. Okay. So when you can learn how to release things quickly, like one thing I learned was that as I continued to do this, because I work with people and I help people clear. So sometimes I'll feel what they're feeling and I'll clear it in myself and it will clear in them simultaneously. Okay. And when you're clearing someone else's stuff, it's not so personal. So you're just like, meh, it's like I was working with someone yesterday and you talk about gut issues. Okay. So I'm going to go into that just for a minute. And when I work with people, I can look at their different chakras and I've been working with this guy for about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks. And at the beginning, he had a lot of anger and we cleared that. And now he's no longer finding himself triggered in anger a lot. And he had some heaviness in his heart area, and that was more grief and a sense of failing. So we cleared that. And I don't think that was originated in him as well. And then like yesterday, I was working with him and I looked into his second chakra, which is, what I like the lower intestinal area between like the belly button and the pelvic bone. And I noticed that there was a lot of stuff coming up in that area. I could just see it in color. It was all gray and it looked inflamed. Okay? And when I checked with my guides about it, I said, okay, what's going on with this guy? And they said he's clearing his lineage stuff now. Okay. He's clearing the ancestral stuff because that's where it all is in that your past life stuff and your ancestral stuff is in the lower chakras. Okay. And that's what takes the longest to clear. But like, when you look at, like I study with avatars and they're just like, when I work with you, I'm working 7 generations back because that's how far back needs to be clear for you to be completely clear. Right. So it's not if you can start thinking of it as, thought, word, deed, perception, the energy associated with it, memories, the energy associated with those. If you can start thinking about it more as data and just clearing the data out of your mind and body,
Yeah.
underneath that, there's perfection, right? So you don't have to fix yourself. You just have to clear what's blocking you from already being perfect. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and that's
It's
really what
just
ancestral healing is. It's really a fast way to do that.
it's like spring cleaning your body. It's a
It,
perfect time of year to let things go.
yeah. I mean, it's when I learned about ancestral healing, one of the things I learned was that, I was told, imagine that your mind, like I learned that the mind and body are interconnected. So if I hold something, if I hold an expectation, or I'm holding on to something, I'll feel tightness in my body. Okay. There has to be represented somewhere, and it's usually represented in the body. And when you release it, it releases from the body. Okay? So when you hold judgment, you hold it in your body. When you hold negativity or perceptions that aren't in alignment with light, you're going to have discomfort in your body. So the body is kind of like the hard drive of a computer, and the mind is more like the screen. Actually, the outside world is more like the screen of the computer. So when you're born into this world, you come with like past life stuff, and I don't know if you believe in past lives or not, but just stuff that is from a previous chapter, let's say that, whether it be your parents' baggage or their parents' baggage or whatever hasn't been cleared yet. Okay. So you're kind of born into that consciousness, and it pre-exists on the hard drive. Okay. And so if it's on the hard drive, it's eventually going to be reflected in your outside life because they mirror each other. So what you believe you're going to see in the outside world. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So ancestral clearing is a way to bring a light force energy that knows how to heal to the whole hard drive simultaneously. So when we do classes on ancestral healing, you're bringing in not only the people in the class, but their spouses, their children, their parents, their siblings, their grandparents, their aunts, their uncles. And you might go back 3 or 4 or 5 generations to where there might be 1,000 people for one person, okay, on a soul level. And then when you do the ceremony and you call in all of the light beings and all of this consciousness that knows how to heal, which is just light and truth, when with permission from the souls that are present, it automatically starts to cleanse everybody simultaneously. And whatever is cleansed out of your great grandfather, let's say, is instantaneously cleansed in you and your children. Okay. Anything that's cleansed back there automatically takes effect in the present moment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it becomes very compounded, and it's an extremely fast way to heal things because we're working on that level of cause on the data, right? And when that data clears, the world of effect automatically gets healed and gets transformed, which is your everyday life. Okay. So it's,
What does it feel like to you or to your clients once a layer's been cleared and cleaned and let go of?
they always say they feel better. Okay. It's like, have you ever, well, my guides are like, that's not a good example.
I've always felt lighter. I
Yeah.
always feel a
Yeah.
light once a layer has been released.
Yeah. You'll feel lighter, and you'll also instantly get some kind of clarity that you didn't have before. So it's like when you clear an emotional charge, let's call it, right? Because I mean, with me, if I have an emotional charge come up, if I have anger come up, or fear come up, or hatred come up, or something like that, I automatically kind of just take note of, okay, something's going on inside me that's not of light, that's not of truth. I'm misperceiving something. Okay. And it could be completely unconscious, but I know that the way to heal it is to bring light to it, to bring that consciousness of truth to it and say, look, please heal this. Please take this out of me and transform it. Okay. And once I've given permission, then I just sit there and I'll just stay present with my breath. I might decide just to feel what it is and without any judgment, and just really, really embrace it. Because once you quit resisting it, you don't suffer. You actually can feel a sense of joy while you're feeling it. Okay. But as soon as it starts to be felt, it starts to heal. As soon as it's allowed to surface, it starts to heal. And we don't know how that works, but we do know it works. And then once it's clear, for me, once it's clear, I'll feel that it's complete, right? I'll feel that, okay, this is no longer active in me. And then I'll get a sense to do something else at that point. Or sometimes I'll feel that it's complete. And then when I look back at the situation, I'll see it through a whole different set of perceptions to where I see it exactly the way it is in truth. And I have no more emotional charge to it, right? So that's if you can take that few minutes to clear it versus try to kill the messenger of it or try to change the outside world so you don't have to feel it. If you could just get comfortable feeling things for a few minutes here and there, you'll realize that it can't hurt you, and it helps with the healing process, not only for you, but for everybody that's involved with that particular energy. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So for those listening who this is resonating for and are thinking, how do I get started? How does one get started?
Well, I think the very first step to get started is to start to realize that you're not your body, okay? And that you're not your thoughts, okay? And the way I did that was in the morning, I'd look in the mirror and I'd just say, I'd look at myself in the mirror and I'd say, okay, hi. And I would just say, I'm not this body, okay? And then I'd said, one day I was clearing some emotions, and it had to do with self-hate, okay? And I could feel the sense of hate, and I could feel it, but one thing you got to realize is that you can feel it, but you can't heal it with your mind, okay?
Yeah.
You can't, from the level of the problem, you can't heal the problem. You have to bring in a higher consciousness. So I started feeling this, and I just started breathing into it because that kind of keeps me in the present. And I just started really getting curious as to what it felt like. I was like, okay, where am I feeling this in my body? And what's it feel like? And then I would breathe into that part of my body and just hold the breath there and just feel it until I could feel it without resistance. Then I released it. And then all of a sudden in my mind, I heard I hate myself. And I was like, huh? And I went to defend against the thought, and my guides came in and said, don't defend against it. Let it go into the light. It's not you. And I was like, huh. And then I heard, well, what would it take for you to be good enough? My guides asked me that question. And by the way, I'm in the present moment now, and that's when healing happens. And they said, what would it take for you to be good enough? And I said, I'd have to get everybody's love and approval, right? And they said, that's impossible. Let it go. Okay. They said, those that like you are going to love you and approve of you, and those that don't won't. And there's nothing you can do about it. Just be yourself, right? And I was like, that makes sense, right? So there was a profound healing that happened on the mental realm, right? And so then after that, they just told me, they said, in the future, remember, you're not your thoughts either. And you don't have to defend against them, okay? Because we receive these thoughts in our mind, but they're not us. We're not the thinker, right? We experience thoughts, but part of the reason why we're attracting thoughts is because of the energy that's stuck in our energy field. So if you have a lot of frustration, you're going to attract situations that bring up frustration and stir up frustration type thoughts. And as you clear the frustration and you ask the light within you to heal the thoughts associated with it, the memories associated with it, the judgments associated with it, the expectations, right? If you have frustration, usually you're holding on to expectations that's associated with it. It knows how to do that. You don't have to be the healer, but you have to give permission, right? So what I teach people is the very most important thing is for you to learn how to be present, even if you're uncomfortable. How to go into that state of awareness to where you can feel what's going on in your body, but you're not identifying that you are your body. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically you're experiencing what your body feels like. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you might be witnessing what thoughts are going on in your mind that you believe are you, okay? But they're just a state of consciousness. It's just your current state of how you're thinking, okay? And that's creating energy, and it's also sustaining the energy, right? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
So once you get to that point of witnessing it, then you kind of decide, well, do I want to hold this kind of feeling in my body? If it's unpleasant, you'll probably say, no, I don't. Okay. All right. So then you want to start releasing it. And what I do to release things is I just invoke, I call it the Holy Spirit or the divine. I invoke a consciousness that knows how to heal. And I'm very well connected to it because I tune into it every day. So I invoke that. And when I feel the presence of that, when I feel the energy of that consciousness, then I know it's present. And then all I have to do is say, take this out of me, right? Take this feeling out of me and heal any thoughts associated with it, any beliefs associated with it, perceptions, expectations, memories. Just clear it into light and into truth. And I don't have to worry about what that is because I couldn't do it from the level I'm sitting at. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then I just kind of let it unfold. And sometimes it happens instantly. And sometimes it happens over days or over weeks, but it always happens. Right. And then eventually that same stimulus that triggered that feeling in me, it'll come up and I'll have absolutely no emotional charge to it. And then I know it's healed. Right. And by the way, then you're free to like be yourself and speak your truth and all this stuff, because, you know, when you don't speak your truth, it's only because you're usually afraid. You've got some kind of emotion that you don't want to have to feel that's going to come up if you speak your truth. Once you heal that, then it's kind of like, okay, well, you know, like if you're afraid of rejection, you're going to act like what you think people need you to be for them not to reject you. Okay. When you heal that emotional charge, which could be from an ancestral healing thing, right? When you finally clear that, then it's like, well, you know, you won't have an emotional charge, so you won't be attacking the person, but you'll just be like, you know, I disagree. This is what I think, right? I think this. And they can either agree with you or not, but it doesn't matter. You're not attached to it. Okay. So as you heal your wounds inside yourself, you'll naturally start getting right thought and right action. And you'll naturally start getting more clear guidance and higher level thoughts, right? You'll start to see things as they are versus through wounds. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Have you found that you've been able to get to this place with your spiritual practice and the way you teach through your teachers or through books or a mix of two?
Well, it's, you know, I was working with this guy yesterday on the phone, the same guy I was helping clear his lineage stuff. And, you know, when I was about, I'll give you a little history. When I was about 18 or 19 years old, I didn't really like school. I was dyslexic and I had a hard time with school. And I was always kind of guided as a little kid. I always heard this voice that said, it's done unto you as you believe in this world. And I was like, what's that mean? And they said, someday you'll know. And I was like, whatever. I didn't even know there were guides at the point, right? But I always had this burning desire to learn an advanced level of consciousness, like not just your normal day-to-day, go to work, come home, have dinner, blah, 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 blah. I wanted to learn how to heal, how to clear things. I wanted to learn what the truth was. Okay. I wanted extremely good guidance to where I wasn't manipulated, right? And I mean, that's like, if you could pray for one thing, pray for very good guidance. Okay. Guidance of truth, I should call it. Right.
Yeah.
Because, or more awareness, you can also say, like, if I ever have like a wound that's coming up and it's repeating itself and I can't clear it, I'll just ask, please help me to understand this and the lessons behind it. And I'll get clarity. And with clarity comes healing, right? It always heals it at the same time. But back to my childhood, I really kind of want to understand how the mind works. So I studied hypnosis for a long time. And I didn't just study it. I studied from people that were healing cancer like 90% of the time and doing extraordinary things with it, curing diabetes, things of that nature. And so then I practiced hypnosis for a while, and I was getting people off of drugs, alcohol, I was working with suicidal people, and it was working. And I was like, wow, this really works. And then I opened a business and I became successful in business. And then later on in life, I got sick again, and I got like a relapse of mono, chronic fatigue syndrome, and nothing could heal it. And so I went to my hypnosis teacher. I'm like, hey, heal this. And he's like, and he couldn't. So then I started studying. I went deeper, right? And it was like, okay, I'm not going to put up with this. I went deeper. And I started studying mysticism. So this is how I started building my spiritual consciousness. I went to this seminar in Laguna by this guy named Ron Roth, and he was a modern day mystic, and he was a healer. He had healing gifts, and I was sick at the time, and I was watching him, and he asked if anybody had back problems, and this lady raised her hand, and he goes, "Come up here," and she went up on the stage, and she was looking at all of us, and it was obvious that one leg was like 3 or 4 inches shorter than the other, and she had a big hunchback. She was all bent over.
Wow.
And he said, "Would you like this healed?" And she said, "Yes." And he touched her spine, and within like 3 minutes, her leg grew to the same size as the other leg, and she straightened up. And he said, "That's the power of spiritual healing. That's the power of the Holy Spirit." And he said, "Who wants to learn how to do this?" And I was like, raising my hand. I'm like, "Woo, I want to learn how to do it." Right. And he gave me all these books. He gave me a list of all of these books I could read to learn it. And it was about mysticism. It was about learning the principles of spiritual healing. And so I spent the next 5 years of my life really fascinated with this and learning all of these spiritual principles of what causes illness and how to release it. And what our role is. Like, spirit will heal us in an instant, but we have a role to play. We have free will. And like, if you are holding like a complete amount of anger and hate towards someone and you're not willing to forgive it, you're going to hold it in your body, and it's going to create suffering, and it eventually could create health problems, right? So if the spirit goes to heal you, it also needs to heal your thoughts and perceptions associated with it. And if you don't give permission, it can't do that. It respects free will. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So I was like really amazed by this guy. I mean, the same guy later on brought this other lady up who was like, like this, right? Rheumatoid arthritis and completely just a train wreck. And he went to touch her, and he said, "You need to forgive your ex-husband in order to receive a healing. Is that okay with you?" And she said, "Yes." And then he touched her and she was healed. And he said, if she didn't release that, I couldn't heal her,
Yeah,
because
I've heard that before.
she was carrying it all in her body. Right. So,
Wow.
surrender to release things like, to release your judgment or your expectation of how someone needs to behave, right, is fundamental. Okay. So I learned all of these things by reading books, and I traveled the world going to people that were producing extraordinary results. They were healing massive things like liver cancer in a week, or this or that, right? I mean, there's this lady now that, my friend went to her a couple weeks ago, and he had type 2 diabetes, and he was healed instantly, right? He needed knee surgery. He was healed instantly. So spirit is above any universal, like, material laws. It can do things that we can't do, but it completely controls what it wants to heal, when it wants to heal, and how much of it wants to heal. We can't control it. We just have to allow it, and then just keep calling it in and giving it permission. So I traveled the world watching these people do this, and I had extraordinary experiences with them, to where like my mind stopped and all my problems were gone instantly, just in an instant. It wasn't like I read a book. It was just like, boom, your mind's quiet now. And it was like, whoa, right? And then all of a sudden I had no problems because I wasn't thinking about them. and and then I did that until about 2010. And then in 2010, I worked with this teacher that was very remarkable, and she taught me how to clear things through prayer work, in myself and in others. And I learned how to do that, and it was really effective. And to me, like, prayer work is nothing but calling in spirit, right? When you say a prayer, what are you doing? You're asking the Holy Spirit or this evolved consciousness to come in, and it's just the prayer is the phone number. Right? So I started realizing that you could pray very effectively for healing. And in terms of ancestral healing, I went to this event one time where this lady was saying these prayers, these ancestral healing prayers, and she had cancer. And so she said the prayers twice a day. And in 6 month period of time, she was healed of cancer. Her brother was healed of alcoholism, and her mom was healed of MS. And she never mentioned either one of their names in the prayer. But the spirit came in and healed the data, and the effect automatically healed. Does that make sense?
Yes, because one
Right?
person worked on it. It's like the
Yeah.
aspen tree. All it
Right.
takes is one, and then everything else that's connected heals as well.
Yeah. Like I do remote work with people, and some of them don't even know that I'm working with them. Okay. Like a mom hires me to work with her teenager or something like that. And I'll look into them. And like I was working with one, and I looked into her, and she had all of this self-hate in her second chakra in her gut. Okay. And I just kept sending light to it, sending this consciousness that knows how to heal. And I just asked her, is it okay to let go of this hate? And on a higher level, she said yes. And it's been like a few weeks now, and it's completely changed. And I've never met her, I've never talked to her. I just hear back from the family, right? And sometimes that's more profound than when they know that you're working on them, right? I mean, you can't do anything without their approval or without their permission, right? I mean, that's one thing. It's like if someone's not open to even prayer work or being sent light or blessings, they won't receive them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I would get stuck in the past. Was I always thought it was my responsibility, and the truth of the matter is it's between that divine consciousness and the person's soul, and it's a dance between those two things. And if both are open, healing takes place, and there's no way around it, right? And it could happen in a way that's far. It usually happens in a way that I could never predict, right? I could never predict it, but it always brings about a good outcome to where the person's at a better level than they were at. They're happy, they're adjusted. And, it doesn't mean that they're not going to have challenges in life, but, what I try to do when I work with people is really teach them how to work with light and how to work with their own spiritual guides, because once that connection is strong enough, they can get through almost anything on their own. And, I think one of the problems with people is that, I work with this guy on the East Coast right now, who, when I started working with him, he was abusing drugs and alcohol. And when I looked into it, I realized that his only problem was he was extremely sensitive energetically. And
Yes.
when someone would project something onto him, like you're not good enough, or, you're not meeting my, like a spouse or something, right? You're not good enough. I don't like you. I don't want you in my life. He would pick up that on a psychic level and feel it as if it was completely said to him. And he would feel miserable, but he didn't know what to do with it, right? And he didn't even know where it was coming from, right? So I started working with him, and I started clearing the wounds it was bringing up in him. I'm not good enough, right? Or it's my fault, right? He was very guilty. And it was like he thought it was his fault that he wasn't liked, or he wasn't, that she didn't want him in his life. And it was like, when you clear that guilt, and you start to take it out of the person, all of a sudden they start to see things much more clearly, and they're not manipulated by guilt anymore, because there's nothing for it to manipulate, right? They'll start to see things as they are. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to see things as they are, you're really healthy. You're really in your own power at that point. So, when you start working with, ancestral healing, I really like doing that. And I do, everything that in any event that I'm at, I try to do an ancestral healing ceremony because it heals so fast. And it not only heals the people that are there, it heals their family members and their relationships to where, like I've seen it to where, parents were alcoholics. And after doing this, they basically lost their desire to drink. And they didn't know why. They just it was very natural. They just didn't want to anymore. Right. It wasn't like they had to do it with willpower. It just kind of got dissolved. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, when I work with people that are into drugs or alcohol or suicide for that matter, all I do is I work on healing the wounds that they're trying to avoid feeling. Right? And as you heal those wounds, the need for the outside, the suppression just goes away. Right? It's like, well, I don't need that anymore. But it just over a few weeks, it just happens. Am I answering your question about my education or how I got into
Yeah,
it? Okay.
this has
So
been so interesting.
yeah, so I spent like 5 years really learning how the mind works, how perceptions work, how the mind-body connection is, how when you believe something, you take on the energy of the belief, and how if you clear the energy, you automatically start to clear the perception, right? All healing is really a shift of perception, right? And if you're suffering, you can bet that you're misperceiving something, right? At some level. I mean, it could be something that's just passed down through generations,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the key is if there's one thing that I would stress, it's really have the desire to start connecting with this consciousness that is truth and that knows what your truth is and knows how to heal almost anything. Well, it does know how to heal anything you come up against, but you want a relationship with it, and you want to give it permission to come into your life and start to guide you. You're like your spiritual guides, right? Give them permission to guide you and to give you what you need for your highest good. And they know how to do that, right? You don't have to like micromanage it. It'll just start unfolding in your life.
Is there any tip that you could share with us today for connecting and communicating with our guides and having them help us let go?
Let go
Let go of any ancestral heaviness that we're carrying.
Yeah, okay. So like, let's just say anything we're carrying, right? Because some people it's like, it's not mine. I don't want it, right? The bottom line is if it's showing up in you, you're responsible to clear it. Does that make sense? You can't just say, well,
Yes.
this is mom's, right? You can do ancestral clearing, which might clear it in your mom and you simultaneously, if it started in your mom or if it started in your grandma, right? But two things that I would say is, number one, you want to really give permission. Like, before you go to sleep at night, even if you don't know who your guides or angels are, right? Everybody has them, and we're all worthy of having them. And more importantly, all of us have a part of us that we inherited from the light, from God. We call it the Holy Spirit, and it's an all-knowing consciousness that is only loving and only healing. Okay? It doesn't punish, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't want you to suffer. It wants you to live in abundance and joy, and it wants you to, to give gifts, just to have gifts to give and create with them, right? And you want to know that that's within you, and it hears every word that you say, and you want to ask it for help, right? You want to ask it for help. And if you find yourself in, like, back to ancestral healing for a moment, I taught like a five-week class on it online one time, and it went pretty deep. And one of the things is that, when you're in relationships, we get into these situations to where somebody really hurts us and we want to get even. We want to prove we're right. We want to prove they're wrong. We want to prove them wrong. Okay. And we get into this battle with them on the mental realm that isn't of light, right? It's usually like fear-based or anger-based or hate-based or something like that. And if you get stuck in that, you block your own guidance, right? Because your guidance works on frequency. So if you're stuck in negativity and hate and anger, and you're really trying to punish someone, your thoughts are going to be attached to that frequency. Does that make sense? And those thoughts are going to be destructive to you and to the other person. And so you want to let go of that and just say, okay, so it's like if you have negativity coming up into you, I offer this to the divine. I offer this to the Holy Spirit. I offer this to that part of me that knows how to heal it. And I ask you to please take this out of me and please heal it. Okay. And you just got to be honest and really want it.
Got it.
Right. I mean, that's really the key to doing prayer work, is to really have a heart desire that you truly want it. Okay. And if you say something, and you really, really want it, there's a lot better chance that it's going to be answered. Okay. And sometimes it's not answered exactly the way you think it should come. But over time, if you ever go through a healing process to where you just keep surrendering it to your divine guides and your divine angels, and when I call them my guides and angels, I always call them the divine guides and the divine angels, because I want to make sure that these are guides of light, right?
Yeah.
That they come from a pure source. And one of the things that I do and Abby does every morning is we meditate first thing in the morning, and we connect to this energy of light, and we can feel it. And then we call in our guides, we call in our angels, and we just say, hey, look, this is your day. Please lead us, guide us, direct us, and protect us each and every second of this day. And then I always follow up with, bring us those you can bless us through. Bring us those you can bless through us, and be the spirit operating in, on, and throughout my being today. Okay. Then I know I've given permission to the highest consciousness I can connect to basically govern my mind and body that day. And then I don't have to work so hard. Does that make sense? I'll start to know things intuitively. I'll start to know, what I should do. And, I might be given challenges, but I'll also be given help to meet the challenges. So that's really important, to consciously want to connect to your spiritual team, and, and try to meditate with people or work with people that are of a pure consciousness that can help you. Like, if you have a wound that you're having trouble healing in yourself because you're believing it so strongly, right? Like I'm not good enough wound, right? For example, right? And it's like everything in your life reflects that you're not good enough, and you just get upset, but you're not healing it. Get some help from someone that's been there, that can hold light for you and help you clear it. Okay. Sometimes we need someone to hold energy for us or hold light for us. And when that happens, they're not attached to that vibration, right? If you're stuck in a wound, you're also stuck in the vibration of the wound. So when someone else holds light for you that doesn't have that wound, they can hold this pure light for you, and they can help you clear it. Because when that higher consciousness comes in, if someone can hold it there, it's going to dissolve the wound. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then as it dissolves the wound, the thoughts automatically dissolve, the memories automatically clear up. Like, you might have a memory, but there won't be an emotional charge to it. And then you'll just feel like you lost 1,000 pounds energetically, right? But that's how it works. That's how it works. But I really try to teach people to go through the process and learn how to feel a sense of joy even while you're going through these things, right? So it's not like, when this changes, I'll feel good. It's like, okay, I can feel good now, even though I have this thing going on in my body. I can still choose to do things I enjoy today, right? And I can continue to work on this, because some things take a while. I had certain things that I cleared for months and months and months, because there were like multiple past lives worth of stuff that needed to be cleared, and the body can only clear things so fast. Yeah.
Well, where can people connect with you or reach out to you if they want to start working with you?
Well, they can connect to me. They can go to our website, and that's www.infinitelight.me. And then they can just send an email through the website, or you can email me personally. My email is 1, and then my name, Jim McCarthy @gmail.com. Okay. And if they want like prayers that I've worked with that really affect healing of emotional trauma or heal relationships, they can just send me an email and request it, and I'll send it. And
Thank
then
you,
we
Jim.
also have classes. We do like spiritual retreats, and we have one in Idlewild in April, to where it's like 3 days of intense healing work and teaching these principles. And we also have one this weekend in it's a one, like a 2-hour class, and it's in Laguna Woods on healing relationships. Okay, so they can look on the website, and all the information's on the website regarding that too.
Thank you. And can
Thank
you leave our listeners with just one last healthy tip that they could consider adding into their life?
Yeah. Okay. Start to really pay attention to how your body feels. Okay. Without trying to change it, just start to monitor it. And if something or someone triggers something in your body to where it activates an emotional charge, to where all of a sudden you're like, oh, and you don't feel comfortable, learn just to really get curious about that and breathe into it and release it. Okay. That's a sign that there's a wound in you that needs to be healed. And most people, what they do is they go in the outside world and they try to change things so they don't feel what they're feeling, what got triggered. And the truth of the matter is if you can start really monitoring and being aware of what your body feels like, and know that it's not you, okay? But it's just something that it's a good device for feeling things, right? And when you feel an emotional charge, let it be a signal to call in the divine, to call in your guides and angels, and to ask them for help to heal it. Okay?
Okay.
Get into that habit of, whenever you feel pain and discomfort, to connect to a source of light and ask for help. Because if you just go into your mind and analyze it, you just basically nurture it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I
And
really
the
like this tip.
Yeah, and the more you get present of being aware, right? The more you become aware of how your body feels and what thoughts go through your mind, and how it all relates, the more you realize it's not you. It's a program that operates within you. But just being aware of it will start to heal it.
Okay.
Right? And it'll also make it to where it doesn't take over you, right? If you can just go into your breath and be present with it, it will usually dissolve and it won't take over you. It's where you try to like fight in the outside world because you feel uncomfortable. It just kind of like can go on for days without even being aware of it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So practice being aware.
Yeah, and not fighting what you're feeling, but asking for help to clear it and let it go.
Yeah. Well, here's another tip. Okay. When you feel something in your body, know that it won't hurt you. Okay. One of the things we're afraid of is when if we feel anger or inflammation or discomfort, we're like, I used to be afraid it would kill me, right? It's like, oh, this is bad. I'm going to get sick, or something's wrong with me. And the truth of the matter is, it's just stuck energy. Okay. So when you can just feel it and just practice this, just say, just make it a challenge for yourself to where you're willing to feel anything for 1 minute, and don't judge yourself for it, because it isn't who you are. It's just energy and it's just emotion. So if a feeling comes up, just say, okay, I'm willing to feel this for a minute, and then just call on your guides and angels and have them be with you while you feel it. And sometimes a healing will happen instantly. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jim. This was such a wonderful therapy session. I
You're
feel
welcome.
so good. And thank you so much for sharing all your insight and wisdom, and all those incredible miracles that you've witnessed. I've loved our conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.